The research station floated silently in the cold expanse of space, a tiny speck orbiting a dying star that had long since exhausted its power. The crew aboard had come to study the phenomenon of stellar decay, hoping to unlock the secrets of a dying sun to better understand the future of their galaxy. No one could have anticipated the discovery they were about to make in the deepest chamber of the station, buried under layers of shielding and insulation. They found it a glowing substance contained in a large transparent sphere pulsing softly with an eerie light. At first, the scientists assumed it was some form of rare cosmic material, perhaps a mineral or gas formed by the star's collapse, a substance that had never been seen before in the universe. But as they began to analyze it with their instruments, something strange occurred. The readings they received did not match anything in their databanks. The substance had properties that defied all known laws of physics. It was as though it was alive, shifting and changing in response to the instruments, as if it was aware of its surroundings. Alia Vale, the lead scientist, was the first to notice the faint hum emanating from the sphere. It was a low, almost imperceptible sound, but it felt as if it were vibrating deep within her bones. She moved closer to the container, running her fingers lightly over the surface of the glass, and as she did, the hum grew louder. The light inside the sphere flickered, and then suddenly flared bright enough to cast long shadows across the room. The rest of the team turned their attention to her, their eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. Alia stepped back quickly, her heart racing, unsure whether to call for containment protocols or to take another sample. The others in the room were equally on edge. No one had expected the substance to react in such a way. No one had expected it to respond at all. The sudden flare of light seemed to be a warning or perhaps a signal of some kind, but none of them could decipher its meaning. They stood frozen for a moment, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The whole station felt charged, as if the very air around them had shifted. Then, without warning, one of the junior researchers, Derkavi Korin, took a step too close to the sphere, his foot brushing against the base of the container. The slightest contact was enough to set off a chain reaction. The substance inside the sphere shifted suddenly. Its glow intensified, and a wave of energy pulsed outward in all directions. The lab lights flickered wildly, and then went out, plunging them into darkness. Only the faint glow of the sphere remained, its pulse now erratic and chaotic. Panic spread through the room as the researchers scrambled to regain control. The instruments went haywire, showing impossible readings as the fabric of space itself seemed to warp around them. Time stretched and contracted in strange, unpredictable ways. The very nature of reality seemed to be bending and twisting. The crew of the station could feel their surroundings distorting, as though they were no longer sure if they were standing on solid ground or floating in the void. Alia's mind raced as she realized the magnitude of what had just occurred. They had unwittingly unleashed something far beyond their understanding, something that might not only change the course of their research, but the entire future of the galaxy itself. What had they discovered? And what had they done? The moment the energy wave faded, the room remained eerily silent, a palpable tension hanging in the air. As the crew stood frozen in shock, the faint glow from the substance was the only light in the room, pulsing with a rhythmic intensity that seemed almost deliberate. Alia quickly checked the status of the station's systems. The power grid had been completely overloaded, and all communications were down. The only thing that worked was the emergency backup lighting, which bathed the room in an unsettling greenish hue. Pavi was the first to speak, his voice trembling as he reached for his datapad to assess the damage. The screen flickered violently before it stabilized, but the readings were incomprehensible. Even for their advanced technology, nothing in their database was even remotely close to what they were experiencing. Alia took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, her mind racing to comprehend the implications of what had just happened. Something far beyond their capabilities had been triggered, and now they were stranded alone in space, with no way of contacting anyone. Alia moved quickly toward the communications array, but the damage was extensive. Even the emergency signals were down. She cursed under her breath, turning to face the others, their eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. They had no idea what had happened or what to do next, but the panic in the room was palpable. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. Without warning, the station's alarms blared loudly, cutting through the tension. The sound of the station's emergency protocols engaged as the systems attempted to reboot themselves. Alia immediately ran to the control center and began working furiously on the console. The team gathered around her, trying to make sense of the data, but nothing made sense. The station's systems were fluctuating unpredictably, as if they were no longer stable. Alia wiped sweat from her brow, her hands shaking slightly as she ran through diagnostics. Each attempt to fix the issues only seemed to make them worse. Every attempt to isolate the core problem was met with more failures. The station's integrity was deteriorating rapidly. They had no idea how much time they had before it became completely inoperable. Then the worst news came. The substance had begun to destabilize once again, its glow shifting erratically, as if responding to something invisible in the environment. Alia stared at the display helplessly as the data confirmed her worst fear. The substance was not only unpredictable, but it was also beginning to exert an influence on the very fabric of the station itself. The walls began to vibrate subtly, a low hum that echoed through the structure. Every surface began to shimmer, as if reality itself was bending in response to its presence. The crew was now in full panic mode as strange distortions began to ripple through the station. The atmosphere seemed to warp and distort, as if space itself was no longer certain. Alia's mind raced with the possibilities. What kind of material could cause such effects? Was it a new form of energy, or something else entirely? Then came the knock on the door. The sound was faint at first, but unmistakable. Someone was trying to break in. The crew froze. All eyes turned to the airlock, where the sound grew louder and more urgent. Alia knew this wasn't a rescue team. No one had been able to reach them, and no one should be able to get in without her authorization. The knock repeated, louder this time, unmistakable. It was someone or something outside trying to enter. Pavi looked to Alia, fear written across his face, his voice barely a whisper. What do we do now? The knock on the door echoed louder now, filling the control room. With an ominous rhythm, Alia's heart raced. Her instincts screamed for caution, yet her mind struggled to make sense of the situation. The station's systems were barely functional, and whatever was outside the airlock had somehow bypassed every safety measure she had put in place. No one could get in, not without her authorization, not without being detected. Yet there was no mistaking the sound. Is anyone else hearing that? Pavi asked, his voice strained, his eyes darting toward the airlock, the tension in the room thickening with every passing second. Alia motioned for the crew to stay silent. The knock sounded again, but this time the sound wasn't just a knock. It was a series of rapid thumps, almost as if the airlock itself was being struck by some unseen force. She could feel the hairs on the back of her neck rise and her breath quicken. Get away from the door, Alia ordered the others, stepping forward, her hand hovering over the emergency weapons console. She needed to be sure before making any drastic moves. No one could afford a mistake, not now. Another knock rang out, this time louder, and accompanied by a deep metallic groan that rattled the walls of the station. The air seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the sound. Alia glanced at the monitoring screens again, hoping for a clue, but there was nothing. The scanners showed nothing out of the ordinary, no sign of life, no external vessel, no transmission, nothing. Should we open it? Asked another crew member, his face pale with fear. Alia shook her head. No, we wait, her voice calm but firm, as she kept her eyes fixed on the airlock door. Then she turned to Pavi. Check the containment protocols again. There's something wrong here. Pavi nodded and rushed to the nearby terminal, the tapping of his fingers frantic as he tried to recheck every line of code. No matter how many times he tried, he couldn't find an anomaly. He cursed under his breath, feeling the pressure mount. The crew remained tense, waiting for the next sound. It came, a low groan, like the door was being tested again. This time the vibration in the room was stronger, almost imperceptible, but enough to make the walls hum, a strange, eerie pitch that resonated deep inside their chests. Alia's mind raced. Was it possible that the substance was causing this, somehow reacting with the station in a way they couldn't understand? She glanced at the substance containment chamber. The glow from within seemed to pulse erratically, as if responding to the disturbance in the airlock. And then it happened. The airlock doors suddenly opened with a screech, the heavy metal sliding open far too easily, as if some unseen force had effortlessly bypassed the station's defenses. The crew stood frozen, staring in disbelief. The light from the room flickered as something stepped into view. A humanoid figure dressed in dark, sleek armor stood in the threshold, its silhouette barely visible in the dim light, its face hidden beneath a helmet that reflected the glow from the substance. The figure moved with deliberate precision, stepping fully into the control room, its presence overwhelming and unnatural. The crew's collective breath caught in their throats as they realized that whatever this was, it was not a rescue team or a fellow scientist. The figure spoke, its voice cold and mechanical. "You are interfering with something you do not understand." The words echoed unnervingly through the room like a warning. Alia's pulse quickened as her mind raced, trying to piece together the mystery. Who or what was this intruder, and why were they here? Without waiting for a response, the figure stepped forward, its armored boots clicking sharply against the floor, each step seeming to shake the room. "This substance belongs to us," the figure said flatly. "You have no idea the power you've unleashed." The figure stood unmoving in the doorway, its presence commanding and unsettling. The crew stood frozen as the words echoed in the air. Alia's mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. She had never seen anything like this before. The figure's voice was cold, calculated, and carried an unmistakable authority. It wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration. Pavi was the first to react, his hand instinctively moving toward the station's emergency weapon console. But Alia stopped him, her gaze locked on the intruder. She needed more information before making any decisions. "Who are you?" Alia asked, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "What do you want with the substance?" The figure remained silent for a moment before stepping forward, the sound of its boots echoing sharply in the stillness of the room. "We are the custodians," it said, its tone almost mocking, as if the answer should have been obvious. "You have no understanding of what you are dealing with, nor the danger it represents." The word custodians sent a ripple of unease through the crew. None of them had heard of any faction by that name, and yet the figure's confidence suggested something far older, far more dangerous than any of them had anticipated. "Danger," Alia repeated under her breath, her mind still racing. She tried to maintain control of the situation, but the more she learned, the more unsettling it became. "What danger do you mean?" The custodian's voice remained eerily calm as it spoke again. "The substance you found is no mere element. It is a key, a weapon, a tool. It can rewrite the very fabric of existence itself. It was created by an ancient civilization to ensure their control over the galaxy. Its power is beyond your comprehension, and it must never fall into the wrong hands." Alia's eyes narrowed. She could feel the weight of the custodian's words pressing down on her, but there was something about their delivery that didn't sit right. She glanced at the crew, their faces a mix of confusion and fear. "We didn't ask for this," Pavi said, finally speaking up, his voice filled with frustration and fear. "We found it by accident. We didn't know it was anything more than a scientific curiosity." The custodian's helmeted gaze turned toward Pavi, its movements deliberate and menacing. "Ignorance does not absolve you," the figure said coldly. "You are playing with forces beyond your control, forces that have the power to destroy civilizations." The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, the temperature dropping slightly, as if the very space around them was reacting to the custodian's presence. Alia could feel her pulse quicken. She had no idea who or what this custodian was, but it was clear that they had not come to offer help. They had come to take the substance, and nothing would stop them from getting it. Alia glanced at the containment chamber again, the substance still pulsing erratically, as though it were aware of the tension in the room, its glow flickering in time with the custodian's every movement. Alia had to make a decision fast. She couldn't let the custodian take control of the substance. If it was truly as dangerous as they claimed, then the galaxy's future was at stake. "We're not giving it to you," Alia said firmly, her voice steady as she turned to face the custodian, "not without understanding what it really is and why you want it so badly." The custodian tilted its head slightly, the motion almost imperceptible, but there was a shift in the air, as though the figure was considering her words for a long moment before responding. Then you will learn the hard way," it said before its hand moved swiftly to a device on its belt. The room fell into complete silence for a brief second before the air around them rippled as the temperature dropped even further and a low hum vibrated through the walls. The custodian had made its move, and Alia had no idea what was coming next. The air around them trembled as the custodian's hand hovered over the device on its belt. A low hum resonated from it, a pulse of energy rippling outward like a wave crashing against the walls of the station. Alia's instincts kicked into overdrive, her mind racing to formulate a plan. But in that moment, all she could do was react. The device in the custodian's hand glowed a bright red before a sudden surge of energy shot across the room. The force knocked Alia and the crew to the ground, their bodies slamming into the floor with a bone-jarring thud. The hum of the energy blast filled the air. But it was more than just sound. It was a feeling, a deep vibrating pressure that seemed to push against them from all sides, forcing the breath from their lungs. "Stay down," Alia shouted, struggling to regain her bearings, her eyes wide as she saw the crew scrambling to get back on their feet. The custodian's presence was overwhelming, its power undeniable, but Alia wasn't about to give up so easily. The custodian stepped forward, its movements fluid and precise, as if each step was calculated to maximize its intimidation. "You still do not understand." The figure's voice was cold and dispassionate, its helmeted face unreadable, but Alia could feel the weight of its words. The substance was never meant for your kind. It was created to control entire star systems, to manipulate space and time itself. Alia slowly pushed herself up to her knees, ignoring the pain in her limbs, her mind focused on the task at hand. They couldn't let the custodian have what it wanted, not without understanding the true nature of the substance first. "If you know what it is, then tell us," she demanded, her voice firm despite the trembling in her chest. "We need to know everything about it." The custodian paused, its head tilting slightly as if considering her words, its hand still resting on the device at its side. The room seemed to grow colder still, the hum in the air intensifying. "It was created by the Caltheri." The custodian finally spoke the name, sending a chill through Alia's spine. "A race older than your galaxy itself. They used it to rule unchallenged for millennia, until they were destroyed by their own creation." Alia felt a surge of confusion. "Destroyed by it?" she repeated. "If it's so powerful, how could they be destroyed?" "The substance," the custodian continued, "was meant to be the ultimate tool of control, but in the end it betrayed them. It consumes everything it touches, bending reality to its will, reshaping worlds and stars, and everything in between. The Caltheri thought they could control it, but they were wrong, and now it remains a curse to any who try to wield it." The crew exchanged nervous glances, fear and confusion evident on their faces. Alia took a deep breath, trying to steady her thoughts. If the substance was truly as dangerous as the custodian claimed, then they were standing on the precipice of something far greater than they had ever imagined. But Alia also knew one thing with certainty: the custodian was not here to warn them. It was here to take the substance for itself, and in doing so it would unleash the same devastation that had destroyed the Caltheri civilization. "If it's so dangerous," Alia said, standing up with more confidence, "then why are you here?" She took a step forward, her voice unwavering. "Why come now after all these millennia? What is it that you want?" The custodian's response was chilling in its simplicity. "To finish what was started," it said coldly, "to use the substance to remake the galaxy in our image and ensure that no power ever rises again that can threaten our control." Alia's blood ran cold at the words. She knew that whatever happened next, the battle for the substance had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than anyone could imagine. Alia stood frozen for a moment as the custodian's words settled over her like a thick fog. The implications were far too vast to comprehend fully. The idea of a single entity using such a powerful substance to control the entire galaxy was beyond anything she had prepared for, yet here it was in front of her, the custodian's intentions laid bare for all to see. "You can't just rewrite the galaxy," Alia said slowly, her voice sharp as she stood her ground. "The Caltheri thought they could, and look what happened to them." The custodian's helmeted face didn't shift, but there was a cold, calculated calmness to its words that made the room feel colder still. The Caltheri were weak, it responded, its voice unwavering. They underestimated the substance's true power, but we will not make the same mistake. The substance in the containment chamber pulsed again, its glow flickering erratically, as if in agreement with the custodian's claim. Elia's thoughts raced. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the very future of the galaxy. "Who are you really?" Elia asked, her voice strained but determined. "What are you? And why have you waited so long to claim this power?" The custodian paused, just for a moment, before it spoke again. "We are the Watchers, the guardians of the old ways. The Caltheri failed, but we learned from their mistakes. We are the only ones who can control the substance without succumbing to its destruction. We are the rightful heirs to its power." Alia's mind raced. The Watchers, the Guardians, names she had never encountered before, at least not in the records of galactic history. If what the custodian was saying was true, these beings were ancient, far older than the Caltheri or any other civilization they knew of. But that raised even more questions. Why had they remained in the shadows until now? Why had they allowed the galaxy to evolve on its own if they were truly this powerful? Pavi took a hesitant step forward, his voice shaky but filled with a newfound urgency. "You're saying you can control it, the substance, even if the Caltheri couldn't?" The custodian's response was swift and emotionless. "Yes, but only if it is in the right hands." Its hand hovered over the device at its side again, and the hum grew louder, vibrating through the very walls of the station. The power the custodian wielded was undeniable, and Alia knew they were running out of time. "Stop," Alia commanded, raising her hand to halt Pavi and the others from advancing. They needed a plan, not a reaction. If the custodian was truly this powerful, there was no way they could overpower it through force alone. They needed to outsmart it, buy some time, and figure out how to neutralize the threat. "We're not going to hand it over to you," Alia said, meeting the custodian's impassive gaze. "The galaxy isn't yours to control. We won't let you remake it in your image." The custodian tilted its head ever so slightly, its voice unwavering. "You misunderstand. You have no choice. You will either give it to us, or it will consume you all, just as it consumed the Caltheri. It will reshape you, break your reality, and destroy everything you know. In the end, it will be mine." Alia felt her stomach drop. The weight of the situation was unbearable, the threat of total destruction looming over them. But she also knew one thing for certain. They couldn't let the custodian get what it wanted. If the substance was as dangerous as it seemed, allowing it to fall into these hands would mean the end of everything. As the tension thickened, Alia felt an unfamiliar energy in the air, almost like the station itself was alive, reacting to the custodian's presence, the substance's influence. They couldn't keep fighting it on their own. They needed to understand more. There had to be a way to stop this. "Tell us everything," Alia demanded, her voice hardening. "Tell us what the Caltheri did wrong. What's the key to controlling it?" The custodian paused. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty passed through its unblinking helmeted gaze, and in that moment, Alia realized that maybe, just maybe, the custodian didn't have all the answers. For a moment, the room was unnervingly still. Alia's words hung in the air, and the custodian's silence seemed to stretch longer than expected. The figure didn't move, but its posture shifted ever so slightly as though it were weighing her request. Alia's mind was racing. She had no idea if the custodian would comply or if it would strike, but it seemed as though, for the first time, it was forced to confront something it had not anticipated. "Why do you seek this power?" Alia pressed, her voice firm, but beneath her steady exterior, her heart was pounding. What happened to the Caltheri? What went wrong? The custodian's voice finally broke the silence, its tone colder than before. The Caltheri thought they could control it. They believed that if they kept it within their grasp, they would be the ultimate rulers of the galaxy. They were wrong. The substance is not a tool of control. It is a force, a living thing that twists and bends the very fabric of existence. It changes everything. The Caltheri believed that their technology could master it, but it cannot be mastered. It consumes. It rewrites reality. Alia's mind reeled. She had suspected that the substance was more than just a powerful energy source, but this was something else entirely. She exchanged a glance with Pavi, who was still trying to grasp the weight of what the custodian had revealed. The Caltheri had not been destroyed because they had failed. It was because they had sought to control something that was fundamentally uncontrollable. So, if it rewrites reality, Alia said, pushing the conversation forward, what happens to the people who try to control it? You say it consumes. Does it kill them? Not directly, the custodian replied, its voice almost detached. It warps them. It warps everything. Those who try to manipulate it don't die. They are turned into something else. The Caltheri became twisted versions of themselves, their minds fractured, their bodies reshaped. And as their civilization crumbled, the substance slipped from their grasp, hidden away in the farthest reaches of space. It is a weapon, not just in the physical sense, but in the way it bends all of reality to its will. Alia felt a shiver run down her spine. The custodian's words painted a horrifying picture. The substance wasn't just a destructive force. It was something far more insidious. It didn't just end lives. It altered the very essence of existence. And now, it was here, right in front of them. And you think you can control it? Alia asked, challenging the custodian. After everything the Caltheri went through, you think you're somehow different? The custodian's head tilted slightly, and for a brief moment, Alia could almost sense a flicker of something beneath its cold exterior. I am different, it said, its voice edged with something that almost sounded like pride. We are different. We have studied the substance for eons. We understand it in ways the Caltheri never could. But you don't understand. None of you do. As the custodian spoke, the glow from the substance in the containment chamber pulsed brighter. It was almost as if it were reacting to the custodian's words, feeding off the energy in the room. Alia's eyes flicked toward it, the strange feeling of unease settling deeper within her. Suddenly, a voice cut through the tension. So, what now? Pavi asked, his voice shaky but resolute. Are we supposed to just hand it over to you? Let you destroy everything in the name of control? The custodian's helmeted gaze fixed on him. I'm not here to destroy, it said. I'm here to restore order, to bring balance to a galaxy that is teetering on the brink of chaos. The substance is the key to ensuring that no power, no rebellion, can ever again threaten the stability of the universe. You don't have to understand, but you will comply. You will give it to us. Alia took a deep breath, her mind racing. The custodian was offering them a choice, submit or perish. But the more she listened, the more she realized that it wasn't just a matter of control over the substance, it was control over everything. The custodian wanted to impose its own version of balance, one where freedom and choice were replaced with rigid, unyielding order. They couldn't let that happen. We won't comply, Alia said, her voice sharp. Not without understanding what you truly plan to do with it. The custodian stood still, its presence like a dark cloud hanging over them. Then you have sealed your fate, it said softly. But know this, there is no escaping what comes next. The substance will have its say. And when it does, you will wish you had obeyed. Alia's stomach twisted as she realized the custodian had no intention of negotiating. The stakes were higher than ever. Whatever they decided to do next, it had to be quick. They had no time to lose. Alia stood her ground, her heart racing as the custodian's words echoed in the tense silence. The entire crew was on edge, their eyes flickering between her and the figure in the doorway. The custodian had made it clear they were running out of time. Yet something in Alia's chest hardened as she realized the true scope of the decision ahead. The galaxy's future hung in the balance. "We won't let you control it," Alia said, her voice unwavering. "We won't let you turn the substance into a tool of oppression." The custodian's helmet tilted slightly, as if studying her, gauging her defiance. "You misunderstand," it replied, its voice low and even. "I do not seek to oppress. I seek to preserve. The galaxy is collapsing into chaos. Rebellions rise and fall. Power shifts unpredictably, threatening to tear everything apart. The substance will restore order, remove the threat of instability." Alia shook her head, her mind racing. If the custodian succeeded, it would never allow the galaxy to evolve freely again. The notion of a single force reshaping everything, controlling the fate of billions with a flick of its will, was too dangerous to even consider. The air around them seemed to grow heavier, a strange energy pulsing through the walls of the station as the custodian's presence intensified. The substance in the containment chamber hummed in response, its glow flickering erratically. It was as though the substance itself was reacting to the custodian's insistence, feeding off the chaos in the room, strengthening with every passing second. Pavi stepped forward, his face set in grim determination. "We can't let you have it," he said, his voice firm. "Not if it means turning the galaxy into your version of order." The custodian's voice grew colder. "You have no choice. This power is not yours to deny. You are insignificant compared to the forces at play here. You think you understand the risks of this substance, but you do not. You are children playing in a field far beyond your comprehension." Alia's mind raced. The custodian's confidence was terrifying, but there had to be a way to stop them. The station's systems had to have some kind of fail-safe, some method of disabling the containment or disrupting the energy field before the custodian could use it for its own ends. She glanced at Pavi, who nodded, understanding what she was thinking. Alia motioned subtly to the control panel near the back of the room. It was risky. If they made the wrong move, they might unleash the full power of the substance. But if they didn't act, they would be submitting to the custodian's will. With barely a word exchange, Pavi darted toward the panel, his hands flying across the interface, working desperately to access the system's deepest functions. Alia's eyes remained fixed on the custodian, trying to maintain control of the situation, but her thoughts were split between watching the figure and praying that Pavi could disable the station's main energy grid in time. The custodian's gaze shifted toward Pavi, noticing the movement, but it didn't react immediately. Alia's heart pounded in her chest. The moment of truth was approaching. Then, in an instant, Pavi hit the final key. The station's lights flickered and dimmed as the power grid began to shut down. The hum of the substance in the containment chamber faltered, its energy disrupted by the station's sudden instability. The custodian's posture stiffened, its hand reaching for the device on its belt. "No," Alia shouted, her voice firm. "We won't let you control it." The custodian lunged, but the instability of the station threw it off balance. The walls around them trembled, and the hum of the substance grew louder, almost as if it was reacting to the turmoil in the room. Alia could feel the energy in the air shift, a raw, untamed force beginning to surge. The substance, now vulnerable to the chaos of the station's systems, pulsed wildly, threatening to break free from its containment. Alia acted on instinct. She grabbed the emergency release lever and yanked it, opening the chamber. The substance shot out in a brilliant, blinding surge of energy, filling the room with a wave of power that rattled the very core of the station. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The custodian's voice, cold and calculating, was drowned out by the overwhelming presence of the substance, which surged around them like a living thing, wrapping around everything in its path. Alia closed her eyes, bracing for the worst. But then, something unexpected happened. The energy seemed to shift, altering its form. The substance stopped attacking, no longer threatening to consume them. Instead, it stabilized, as if it had reached some kind of balance. The custodian staggered back, its expression unreadable beneath the helmet. "What have you done?" it whispered, its voice thick with disbelief. Alia breathed a sigh of relief, the weight of the situation sinking in. They hadn't destroyed the substance. They hadn't unleashed it upon the galaxy. Instead, they had disrupted its ability to cause chaos and taken the first step toward understanding it, before anyone, including the custodian, could control it. The station shook again, but this time it felt different. The substance had chosen its own path, and Alia knew that the galaxy would have to learn to live with the consequences.